Hi, everyone, and welcome to Found Friday. I'm your host, Karen, and with me today I have Erin O'Brien, Skinsometrics COO. Hey, Erin,
Hey,
how's it going?
going good. Happy Friday.
Yeah, I just want to note that it is June and not July. Anybody who watched our episode last week. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that we've received a lot of questions about, especially in recent months: communicating your marketing ROI to executives. And Erin, I know we've talked a lot about this recently, and we're finding that most marketers are trying to track the success of their content and campaigns, while the C-suite is really turning up the heat and is asking for results that show measurable contribution to the bottom line. Avoiding reporting overload while delivering meaningful reports to the right people at the right time is really the challenge at this point. So having marketing intelligence tools that ease the reporting function is the first step to overcoming the burden of data delivery, in my opinion. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's start a little bit about talking about the executive team and why does the executive team need their own reporting?
So I think there's probably a lot of reasons for why people often provide different reporting to the executive team versus what maybe kind of inter-team communication or the reporting that you would maybe do for you and like maybe your direct manager. And the first reason that I think that that's really important is to have a separate set of reports is reporting for a lot of folks, especially in large organizations, can be really big and super detailed. And the idea for what you want to provide up the food chain is an analysis of the details, the lessons learned, the actual real results, next steps, etc., as opposed to kind of a granular listing of individual items, individual detailed performance reports. And another thing that I think everybody should care about, but specifically kind of executives and C-suites care about, is going to be, how much did this cost? How much did it gain us? Like, what was its impact on the bottom line? And that's usually kind of like the bubbled up version that would make somebody either want to dive deeper into understanding more about the reporting and asking for additional information, or saying like, oh, okay, great. I know that this worked. I know that this is how this happened. And then being able to kind of move on from there.
So what do they really want to see? Are there some standard things that all C-suite members look for?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that we're really talking about making information about what people are doing and across different departments, both informative and easy to understand. And kind of like I just said, at the end of the day, for most folks, it's how did this affect the bottom line? How will this affect the bottom line? What's the next logical step, or how can we improve it? So recommendations for future improvement. One of the things I always look for in kind of general reporting from the team and from what we're looking at is what are the current things in play? Like, what were the decisions that we made that led us to doing, whether it's a campaign, an initiative, whether it's just kind of quarter over quarter, what things were in play to contribute to these numbers. Do we recommend continuing with these things that we said were in play? What about them worked and what about them didn't work? And so it's really that easy, kind of a really short executive summary. And then if I want more information about something specific, there can be multiple other pages or items that are there to dive into. But I want to be able to kind of get a really quick overview so that, because I may be looking at reports across multiple different areas. So
Right.
I'm not just looking at marketing reporting, I'm looking at product reporting, sales reporting, uptime for the platform, like all these different things. And so it's sometimes I'm making conclusions based on snippets of information that are a little bit different than what somebody may provide me from like strictly their department. So I like to be able to ask for what individual pieces of things I want to know.
And do you think that that's changing? Is there a change really in how reporting up the chain is being done now, because there are so many shifts in the technology that's being used for sales and marketing? And if there has been a change, I'm going to ask two questions. How can people stay on top of providing the execs need in a constantly changing environment?
So I think that this is really complicated, and it's one of the reasons we keep getting so many questions about reporting because there are so many different marketing channels and marketing mediums and marketing tools that you're getting a ton of data from a lot of different tools. Some of it overlaps, some of it doesn't. Some of it actually even conflicts at times, and different folks are responsible for reporting on different things. So there's a couple different ways to view it. So if you are the person who's responsible for handing off a final report to, like top level management, I would say that you need to make sure that you don't just take reports from individuals and like staple them all together and hand them to somebody as like individual reports. It's up to you to look at all these reports, analyze the information, come up with a summary of how all these things are done. And if you do notice discrepancies, you need to like get people together and ask questions about it. It's one of the reasons that I advocate that, if you have a report that's due on the last day of every month for that month, don't wait until 30 minutes before it's due to just gather everybody's reports and then hand them off. The other thing that's important with this too is I actually don't think it's good to report a month's progress at the end of the month. I think that sometimes what you need is time to really evaluate and compare, but a lot of times people feel rushed to provide data up the food chain about how something performed. Another time that happens is people get really excited because numbers get shown, and it looks like there's been a really big win, and we get really excited and we want to go report on it without knowing whether or not that's spurious data or whether or not those are real results, and what they're actually based on. So I think that taking your time and really planning out that is important. As an individual contributor, I think that keeping in mind that your reporting data may be aggregated with lots of other people's data and it's trying to paint a larger picture is really important. So anything you can do to help keep that aggregation and bigger picture view in mind, providing your own kind of version of an executive summary, understanding how other people are formatting reports. So if there's not a common template used across all areas of the marketing department, look at what's the way that everybody else is doing things, because it's a lot easier to compare and compile things if they're somewhat formatted similarly, which seems like a really basic thing, but you'd be surprised how often we hear that people aren't doing that.
Well, and we've touched on this a little bit earlier in previous conversations, just about the complication of having so many platforms and the problem with the disparate data that comes from that. So when I do the recap of this, I'll be sure to include a link to some of those resources where we talk about the problem with using too many platforms and some of the problems that can arise from that.
Awesome.
Because I think that really sort of feeds into what you were just talking about getting all this different information from different places. And if everyone is getting their data in a different way, right, that job's going to be a lot harder.
Totally.
So, are there metrics I should be including in reports to show the ROI of my content marketing efforts? Specific metrics, do you think?
I mean, so specific metrics, I think, kind of depends on what your marketing mix is for content, for all of your marketing. But one of the things that we talk about a lot that I think that is really important in measurement is this idea of the medium, the method, and the message, so that what you can show is, how specific elements of your marketing have really affected change and how you're going to take the knowledge of what has changed or how things have been affected and make better decisions moving forward, or how you're going to amplify the good decisions you've already been making. I think that one of the kind of common issues that happens is I'd get a report, back when I worked in kind of the agency world or, larger corporations, I get a report and it says, oh, we increased such and such by X percentage. And then I want to know why. And then I want to know, is this something we can expect to happen? Or is this kind of like a one-time thing? Did we boost, ads, ad budget that month? Or, did we have an unexpected pop because somebody famous happened to like retweet a piece of content, or what may have contributed to these factors, or did we stumble onto some messaging that really resonates with people, and should we be really trying to build on that? But if you don't know and you don't get the insights that tell you that, you're left in this idea of, while you're happy that something good may have happened, you don't understand how you can duplicate that moving forward, or you don't know whether or not it is duplicatable, and you don't want to be responsible to say, okay, we're growing, now we need to keep this going, if it was something else. The other kind of part of specific metrics you want to put in is you always want to be able to understand that content is not an overnight game. And I think a lot of people get that. You're not going to start a content marketing campaign today and then do a report in a week or two, and say that you have all the data. Content kind of continues to hopefully generate organic traffic over time, which is one of the reasons content marketing has become such a big deal. And one of the reasons SEO is really starting to regain popularity with a lot of marketers is because when you're creating great content, there is inherently an organic marketing element of findability on search engines. So what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to show kind of the lasting long-term effects of your content. And so just because you released something a few months ago doesn't mean you forget about it. You need to make sure that you go back and say, what are still the top traffic drivers? Like, ironically enough, you and I were just discussing this with Ray yesterday, and you look at the list of, top performing content, and some of our top performing content are blog posts that are over a year or two old because they're still the top findable content for that subject. And I mean, that's the gift that keeps on giving, but you want to include that in reports because that's a continued win, and that's continuing to drive revenue for us, like something we did a couple of years ago.
Well, and I think also looking at that evergreen content and saying this is a subject matter that's still resonating and people are still taking and looking at this year-old blog. Let's see if there's more that we need to do.
Could we create a video? Could we create a slide share? Could we update the blog since it's now a couple of years old? Like create a second post to kind of append to it. One of the things I always recommend with people is like, if you do have this kind of evergreen content, don't necessarily just go in and update the old post with more stuff, which is also fine at times. But, one of the things Ray brought up yesterday that I think is really good when you're talking about content strategy and content, like the real efficacy of content and how it continues to drive traffic even after you've stopped trying to actively drive traffic to it, is people, if you do have really awesome content, will backlink to it. Like people will link to that content. Make sure those links are still active, especially if you've changed over things or, changed blogging platforms or web hosting platforms. Make sure all those links are still there, because you could be missing out on a ton of traffic from people that are linking to something that they thought was great originally that now doesn't exist or looks all, messed up and janky. So like you really could leverage and build on stuff that's already out there and already working, as opposed to trying to come up with something new every single time.
Right. Well, and that's the whole point, is that especially with how much time and effort content marketing takes to be able to repurpose things and use those things that are popular, it's going to show a lot more. And we're talking about showing ROI. That's going to show your ROI in the future. I have a question from someone in our audience that I want to share with you. It's, how can I share actionable data and make recommendations for changes based on them at the same time without making the reports too long? I think this question is really like, how can marketers show their value through adding their own comments?
So I think that, I always want to see some analysis done on the part of the person who's providing the reporting, because ideally the person who's providing the reporting is closest to the subject matter and should have daily intimate knowledge of what contributing factors are affecting the reporting. So the kind of like color commentary from that person is often the most helpful, because you're watching the day-to-day changes. You remember everything that happened. Ideally, like you've made notes, kind of in there. And that's actually one of the things that I think is really important about, one of our tool things that people really like is you can add your own annotations into the dashboard. So like say you release a new campaign or update messaging, et cetera, you can add annotations and it'll follow you throughout the dashboard. And that'll remind you like, oh, hey, one of the reasons we saw a spike the following week was because we did X this week. So I think that that's really important. being able to add your own comments and recommendations, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it kind of depends on who you're working with. But one of the things I like is kind of an initial overview of main data stuff with kind of a set of annotations below of, like this contributed to this, like a really quick summary of that information. And then a page of like projected next steps, or presented next steps. Like, here's what I would like to do. Here's the timeline for when I'd like to do them. And here's what it would cost me to do these things. Or, here's the resources I need to make this happen. And then here's the projected results from what would happen if we did this. Because one of the things that I think is also really difficult if you are in the day-to-day part of this is that you're looking at all of your day-to-day stuff. You're like, oh, well, if I just increased the budget here by like $10 a day, or, if we just did this one thing, so much great stuff would happen. But so much great stuff is not quantifiable to me. I need to know for every X amount of money I spend, or for every time I pull a resource from one thing and put it towards another thing, what am I going to get back? Because I have to make trade-offs, right? And a lot of times there are trade-offs that you don't see if you are working on a specific project. And the idea is, like, if I give money to that project, even though it may increase the efficacy of that project, taking resources away from another project likely means the decline of something else. So I have to weigh, like, what's really going to net out the biggest yield here. And so that's why I like to have both the color commentary about like why things worked, why things didn't work, what we want to change moving forward. And then if we make these proposed changes, what are the predicted outputs? Now, this does not mean that I hold people to these exact numbers, by the way. It just means I need an idea.
Well, I think it's important for marketers to set themselves up as the expert. And by putting those comments in, they're really letting the executives or the clients know that, hey, I understand what all this means, and I know what the next steps are. I understand how this works. And I think just that's a good way to just set yourself up as that expert and to set yourself up as that leader within an organization or with your clients.
Yeah, and that always goes back to the idea that, don't tell somebody a problem if you don't have a proposed solution. Even if your proposed solution is just the beginning of something, or you say, I want collaboration on the solution, at least have kind of thought through what the ramifications of the problem would be. Because to me, if you come to me with a problem and you have no idea for any next step for the solution, it's possible that you're not in the right role, because like, you're close to this, you're doing this every single day. Like, how do you have no thoughts or feedback on how to even go about fixing it? Even if it's just pie in the sky ideas, like, I just want to hear something. I want to hear that you've thought through. So like, if numbers start to tank, I want to know that you've looked into what's causing the numbers to tank, and then what we're going to do to start to fix it. Even if I don't agree with your solution, like, you're responsible for the numbers, like, what's going on?
Right. You should know. So given that, how often do you think data should be shared? Because if you're sharing it too often, it's going to take over your life, especially if you're taking the time to be thoughtful about it and adding comments. And do you think it's important to stick to the same reporting timelines that have maybe been established even before you got there, or has just been used for years? Or do you think it's at times appropriate to update those reporting models?
I think that one of the things, so, I touched on this a minute ago, but I do feel really strongly about this. Sticking to reporting that just is like monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever, makes sense if your business model has something to do with that. So I'm not saying that people should stop like quarterly reporting or monthly reporting, but for marketers in particular, campaigns may not be built on those timelines because consumers aren't necessarily thinking like, oh, I need to spend all my June money before July hits, so like I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. The way that consumers are often thinking, or that users are often using tools, doesn't necessarily adhere to everybody else's calendar year, which is why a lot of companies have like really weird fiscal years, but they also have weird fiscal years for budgeting reasons, which is a whole other conversation. But one of the things that you can do is you can create, even if you don't necessarily send them to anybody, you can create your own reporting that has to do with your campaign timelines, your output, et cetera. And one of the things that this will do is this will actually make it a lot easier to compile larger reports for bigger strokes of time. So like say somebody wants a big year-end report, but you've actually kind of diced up things by campaign throughout the year. It's way easier to go back and compare campaign to campaign when you've been doing the reporting that way. It's also really helpful for you because you can go back and review lessons learned much easier when you're doing it on a timeline that actually makes sense for you, your outputs. So I think that while it sounds like it's adding more work, it actually, to me, makes your life simpler in the long run, because you can make smarter decisions in less time without having to wade back through old data or looking at reports that are quarterly or monthly that may not actually be relevant to the decisions you need to make at the time. And so I think that if you're on the agency side, honestly, I know that clients always have really specific reports that they want a lot of times. And agencies, because they are doing so much reporting and because agencies are tasked with doing so many different things, that a lot of times they feel like they're just getting stuck in this like reporting deluge of just constantly creating stuff. Pushing back and saying, look, I know you want these numbers. At the end of the day, though, like the numbers that are really important or the information that's really important is here. And I know that a lot of times the person that the agency is working with is their client, but their client is reporting up the food chain to somebody else. So they're asking for these numbers for a specific reason. I think, screw it, just send them the information that you think is really important alongside the reporting that they're already asking for. The added value and the insights that they could gain from that and the recommendations that you're making, and then you can kind of back up your recommendations with it, is really important. I know that, that used to be one of my pet peeves, was having to provide reporting every week and every month that was just like this list of numbers, but there was no place to add any insight into what had contributed to the numbers, why the numbers were important, like how we were making decisions based on the numbers, or what happened to the numbers once they went in-house. So I think that's really important.
So in some ways, it can almost be a time-saving device, because you're making decisions based on real-time data. I have another question from our audience, and I think this is important. They're asking how they can share losses or things that need to be improved the most effectively. And I think sometimes there's a little fear associated with reporting that things didn't perform well or that things need to change.
Yeah, we talked about this a few months ago, and because we can't cure endemic problems, throughout the industry, the recommendation that I'd made previously was that people need to be more understanding of kind of the rises and falls that happen, and that if you're working with somebody who makes it impossible to ever say that things are not rosy all the time, that you're probably working for somebody that's not going to be around at the company for very long, because like everything goes through rises and falls, and like good things and bad things will happen, and being able to own those things is really important. I think that's actually one of the first things, is taking ownership of what you can take ownership of. This is not an admission of guilt or fault or having done a poor job. It's simply saying, like, this is the current state of things, and it's my responsibility to like help get us back on the right path. I want to work with you to do that. Like here are, I think kind of being like a data investigator is really important. Like, what happened? Were we trying something new and the new thing just didn't work? Like, that's kind of a fairly easy explanation. Have we been doing something for a long time and all of a sudden it fell off? And if that's the case, what caused it to fall off? Is there a new competitor in the market that's starting to take share, that's doing a better job of messaging? Has your audience kind of started to shift over time and you're starting to see a drop off from that? Like, going in and investigating those things is really important. And if you owe information before you have a chance to do kind of a good investigative analysis, I would even talk to the person that you owe this report to and put a note in there that says, like, I am looking into this and I will provide a follow-up report, like, once I know like why this happened. I think that there's, and then you actually have to do it. You can't say you're going to do it and then forget about it. Like, you actually have to do it. And then I think that there's also, you know, we go back to recommendations and next steps. So this didn't work, or this has started to decline. I don't want to just know that it started to decline. I want to know what now. And I want to know what the timeline is for correction. I don't want to just say, you know, oh, this stopped working, so now we're going to just do this other thing. I'm like, well, when are we going to do it? When can we expect to see a turnaround? When can we expect to see improvement? And then I want incremental updates, you know? So like if, you know, say web traffic, like really, really tanked, I don't want to just be told that web traffic has tanked and that you're going to fix it. And I certainly don't want to be told that you're going to fix it by just throwing more ad dollars at it. I want to be told how we're going to fix it. And then I want somebody to come back to me like a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever later and say, hey, you know, traffic's back up to normal or getting back up to normal, so that I can kind of know what's going on.
Well, I think we hit on this a little bit a few weeks ago again, talking about seasonal shifts. So really looking at your data over time to see if the dip you're seeing happens every year at the same time. So taking that into account, I think, is important. And as with the other subject, I can include that also in the recap so people can kind of get an idea of how to look for those seasonal shifts and some things to do around that as well. So to wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about the marketing intelligence and reporting tools and how they can help and what people should be looking at, looking for when they're looking at these tools.
I think you want something that is not this kind of one size fits all, like we are going to spit out the report we think you need. I think you need to be able to really create your own reports that make sense for your organization, make sense for your role and your team. And it's one of the reasons we built a very modularized reporting center. And then so you can pick and choose the modules you want to include. And then you can actually individualize each module. So you can pick what data you want to be shown inside the modules, and you can update this at any time. You can create multiple duplications of reports with different specifications. I think that that's really important. I think that, you know, within kind of a reporting platform, the other thing that's also really important is for you to be able to make your own notes and annotations inside of reports. So it's not just, here is this graph, and then if you want to make your own annotations, you're like, well, I have to copy and paste this graph into something and make notes, or I have to like hand write a note on here. You should actually be able to make annotations in there, and kind of footnotes and captions and things to really personalize how this reporting goes, so that you can provide this kind of color commentary that we're talking about, so that you can provide these recommendations like, hey, this graph looks like this. This is last month's version of the graph. You'll notice the difference. Here's my recommendations for getting things back on track. Or here's the reason why we had this spike. Like, isn't that awesome? You know, whatever you need to do. So I think for me, a platform that allows you some customization and real individuality with how you want to show data, and that can also be scaled kind of up and down so that you don't have to change reporting platforms constantly. The other thing that I think is important for reporting platforms for marketers right now, especially those in content, is you need something that can give you an overall kind of picture of how things are going. Even if you're not responsible for the entire picture, understanding your place in the ecosystem and how the decisions you make and the work that you do affects other things is really awesome to see and very helpful. And then from like, obviously from a manager standpoint, reporting up to an executive person, having a place that can kind of compile lots of different data together from a content perspective is really important. So like, at Ginza, even though we are mostly search and content focused from kind of a, you know, content performance and recommendation side, we include data about how email and like paid advertising and everything is contributing to the overall findability of your content and your brand, so that you can put all of those pieces together and see the shifts. Because oftentimes email marketing is not talking to paid advertising, is not talking to social. And so being able to see how those things work kind of at the meta level across campaigns, across geographies, across, keywords and topics or product features, etc., gives everybody a lot more insight to make better decisions on their own. Because too often, like somebody at the top will kind of compile a report, but everybody else doesn't necessarily get to see how all the things intermingled to make something cool happen.
And I also just want to touch quickly on white labeling. I think that especially for people who, for agencies, they're going to want to put their own logo onto those reports and establish themselves as the people providing the data. Do you have some comments about white labeling?
White labeling, I think, is important. I think that one of the things that's funny about white labeling is, like, I think it's cool for brands too, right? Like, even if you're in-house, you want the report to look like you, like, totally cool. Make it look like whatever you want. One of the reasons I think white labeling is an interesting kind of demanded feature, because we allow people to just white label whatever, whenever, and you don't even have to contact us. You just upload your own logo, and as soon as you upload your own logo, it removes ours because we don't have any problem. White labeling was historically something that people were charging for because they wanted it to be like, well, this is our platform, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, to me, I don't care either way. If you're getting your data, like if we're using a marketing platform, and I know as the executive that we're using this marketing platform because I'm paying for it, like it's a budget line item, I don't care that the report has the marketing platform's name on it. I also don't care if we want to scrub it out and make it look like us and it looks prettier to, it just kind of is more cohesive and part of our brand thing. Like, either way is fine with me. I don't put too much emphasis on whose logo is on the report. From an agency perspective, I totally understand why white labeling is really important. And I think that tools that aren't providing a white labeling option just standard as their go-to and they're charging for it, probably need to get their act together, because it's not that hard to do. We're not even a huge company, and it's something that's just like baked in natively to everybody's capability. Is like, you can just white label your reports. You can white label the entire dashboard. You could literally just white label the entire dashboard. And it's not a big deal, because at the end of the day, as a platform provider, your job is to get the information to the people that need it in the way that they want to see it. And if the way that they want to see it is with like a Cookie Monster in the corner, like, just let them put Cookie Monster in the corner. Who cares?
Exactly. Well, as always, Erin, our conversation has run a little bit over, but I just want to make sure, are there a couple of takeaways that we can leave marketers with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the kind of key takeaway here is reporting needs to be done in a way that services best the organization that is doing the reporting. And that starts at the individual level and understanding, because you're doing the day-to-day things that are being reported on, what the most important facets of this are, how the numbers got to where they are, how the numbers are going to look moving forward, and what plans you have to affect them. And getting those kind of key things in line every time you report on something is really important. And then also understanding that just because there is a standard reporting structure that people have always done doesn't mean you have to keep doing it that way. You can make your own reports, even if you're the only person that reads them, even if you only share them internally, because having better insight and making better decisions helps everyone, including you, at the end of the day. And I'll leave off with the thing that my mom and dad told me when I was younger, and I've told everybody that I've ever worked with or worked for since I was, a kid, is your job at your job is to make your boss look good. And great reporting is the thing that's going to make the person that is your manager look good, because it helps them do a better job. And that's like what we're all trying to do. And so I think that keeping that in mind, it's not a like fall on your sword kind of a thing at all. And it's not a like, I'm here to be your servant. It's I understand that the way that I look good is when someone else looks good, because if they don't look good, the entire team suffers. And so sometimes you have to do your part by providing information in the best possible way, even if it's maybe like a little outside of the norm.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you're interested in being part of this conversation, you can join us on Twitter at #FoundFriday. We're always available by email, Erin@ginsametrics.com, or Karen@ginzametrics.com. Ask us your questions, give us your comments, and we'll be sure to get back to you. And we're always looking for great ideas for future Found Fridays. So if you have a question around marketing intelligence, content marketing, SEO, that you'd really like us to address in a longer format, suggest it as a Found Friday topic, and we'll take it under consideration.
Sounds great. Well, I will talk to you next week, Karen.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.